Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Let's start our session by reciting Ulumul Kitab Fatihah. Alright, for this session, we're going to cover our next chapter, which is the chapter number 11, session tracking. And this week we need to cover two chapters, which for tomorrow we're going to cover on MVC, model, view, and controller. For tomorrow's session, it's like how you can combine everything, right? Beam, servlet, and JSP to be your project, right? For today's session, right, how to make use of the session, right? What people normally using for session, okay? And this is what we're going to cover. Why we need session tracking, okay? The basic of session tracking, okay? And the API of session tracking. Normally we use HTTP session, right? And browser session versus server session. All right. Next, why we need a session, right? We do have HTTP protocol, right? Okay. Why we need a session to keep track of user? Anyone knows?
So maybe to restrict access to some files, so only the users who have access, when they log in, they can access those pages, like for separating admin and student, like that, maybe.
Yes, somehow I have explained that. But normally, because of HTTP is a stateless protocol, mean HTTP unable to track you, unable to track the user activities. Okay, they can, it cannot track like who is access the website, what they are doing, right, in more detail. Right? For example, when you connect to the server, right? For example, shopping cart, right? Server, it does not know what item that user has picked or what item user has access or how many times this user with this ID has access to your website. So it's like stateless protocol. It's like unable to track protocol. If we have HTTP, that's why we need a session to do more thing, more tracking thing. Right? Previously, people does not care about tracking. Right? You just have website. Everyone just visit the website and read. Right? But this day, we are concerned more on how tracking. Right? User behavior, when they log in, how many times they have login per week, per year, when they have login, do they buy directly or the third number or the fifth number of visiting, then they buy, right? That tracking. So people are more concerned about data, right? They want to get them as much data that they can to 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 do something for their application. Okay. Okay, next, there are some solution without session that you can use. Next is the first one. There are three type solution without session that you can use to track, such as cookie, right? But however, the cookie, what we can call, its web server can assign unique ID for cookie, for each client, okay? But it's not efficient way, right? Where some browser are not support cookies and it will lose the track, right? normally what people use for cookie just to observe the general information. For example, today how many people have access. For example, our browser, they are store some cookie, right, that you have access. Those cookie normally help you to store information when you visit the next time the same website, it will load faster. That is use of, because some information has stored in your browser. That is purpose of cookie. It's different from tracking that people are looking this day. Cookie has been famous in previous day to improve the performance of the system, but not for the tracking of the user. Okay, the second one, instead of the session that you can use also, is hidden form field. For example, you have created a form, right? But the type is hidden. Then you assign the session ID for this. Okay. By this, you can track some, but from time to time, when you pass from page to another page, it like almost impossible for you to pass this value to another form, right? Because you need a lot of form. Form is like static, normally just to receive the static data, right? It's different from the session that we're going to have. Okay, next you can have an extra value at the URL, right? URL, for example, after your page, you have assign some session ID. Okay, so this one similar to the form, right? No static HTML allowed, since it will lose the track for the session ID, right? Mean both of these are not consistently can track. For one page, yes, you can track, but for the rest of the activities that user has performed in your system, it's like impossible to track. That's why most people prefer to use the session, right? Okay, next session. What is session, right? So for JSP, there are API that you can use. Okay, JSP make use of the servlet provided HTTP session interface. You can use this interface or this API, right, for the session. Okay, this interface provide a way to identify a user across. For example, this session or this interface, okay, can a one page request, so one user have request, you can track. Okay, how many user has visit a website, or store some information about that user. Okay, so for example, this computer login, the server will assign session ID 1. Then this user still in, second user come, session ID 2. Third session, session ID 3. Okay. Once this user has logged out, right? When he log in again, he may get a different ID number, session ID number. So the session will store the date of his login with the ID number of that session, right? So different date may have the same session number. That's how they track. So by that, they can know how many people have visit. This user has access how many times in this week, right? And then, okay, other activities, there are some method that you can use to track, common method. Okay, next, by default, JSP have session tracking enabled. So by default, JSP has enabled the session, right? Okay. And new HTTP session object is initiated for the new client automatically. Okay. To disable the session, you need to have this page directive, page session equal to false, right? By default, it's already true, right? Okay. Again, I will explain. For example, session ID 1 for the client 1, okay, and then session ID 2 for the client 2. But when this guy has log out, he will not get the same session ID for the next login, but he still have his ID, the same ID, right? Okay. Next, this is some method that you can use, right, to manipulate the session. Okay. Any question before we start? Sorry, before we proceed about session, the overall idea of the session, right? Mean same user logging several times in the same system in a day, he or she may not get the different session number, may get the same session number. Any question? Someone want to ask a question? Right? Okay, maybe I will have some example, then you can answer the question. Okay, good. Okay, this is some method that you can use. All right, some ready-made method that you can use to manipulate the session. For example, get creation time. For example, what's the time that user has login? For example, he's login at 10 a.m. User ID 1 has login at 10. Then you get, okay, this guy login at 10 a.m. So the session ID, he is the first one who login, ID number 1, for example. Okay. Okay, next string ID, you have long get last access time, make inactive interval, okay, invalidate set attribute. For example, last access time. For example, when is the last time this guy has access? Okay, make inactive. For example, one he has not active for 15 minutes, then the session will be end. Okay, invalidates, right, to end the session. This one, set attribute, right? For example, you want to set the username here, and this is the value of the user. For example, this username has login, and then you get that username. For example, Ahmad login, so this session is belong to Ahmad. You want to track the user, and then what the value? Oh, his ID. Okay, set maximum inactive, right? Okay, we have some example here. For example, right, this creation date, then you track the date. Session get creation date, right? Then this session we get the date, today date that he has visit or login. Okay, and this one date get last access time, right? Last access time that he has access, right? Okay, and then you can have this one to set the attribute user ID key. For example, this user ID, right? Who is login? User ID, right? Assign the ID, and then you want to count this user has visit how many times, right? How many times he has access? So you count, right? The first one, for example, when he access, this is the session ID, right? This session ID, not user ID. Creation time, the time that user has access. Okay. Last access time, for example, last access time for that user. Right. For example, he has access from 10, last access time at 5 p.m. Okay. And user ID is, for example, ABCD, right? User ID, he has, for example, you can name, you can track the username as user ID, or the staff number of those who has login, right? And number of visit, how many times he have visit. For example, he have not visit again. When this guy access again, second time, this one we create 1. Okay. And next, how to delete the session. Very simple. You can use remove attribute, right? Remove string name, right? Normally, delete session to end the session, we put at the logout time, or one user has complete any page, any activities you want to end the session, right? Okay. This one to delete the whole session, right? You can set public. Okay, you can set public void invalidate. Invalidate means destroy or the whole session, right? This one, setting the session timeout, right? You can set maximum inactive, right? Interval, right? If user has not active for 5 minutes, then session will be end, right? This is the method. Okay, for the web.xml, you can use this configuration to set the timeout, right? Session configured, this one, close sessions configured. Session timeout, for example, 15 minutes, right? Then it will log out. Okay, this very simple of the session. Okay, and again, normally session people use for login and logout, right? Login and logout is the common, right? Common, you can see a lot of the example. Okay, for this example, I just show you on some example for this available method to be used, right? To keep track. So in your system, I believe you need to track, right? Track the user, right? Track the user and store in your database and display back what information that you want to display. Okay. All right. Any question for the session? Right. Again, I will make a short video tutorial for the session tracking, right? To show you this code, right? I will choose some others example for you to see, right? Any question for the session? Right, for those who just join, I will upload this video from the beginning.
So, sorry, sir, for because I'm late. I have a quiz before this.
Oh, you have quiz before this?
Yes.
Okay, no worry. We have record. I will
Alright.
stop the record. You can watch this